Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Madness and Meaning. I think I'm really excited for this topic today. I think this is going to be a particularly juicy one. And what we're going to be discussing today is our resistance to owning our own greatness and a lot of the projection work that can come up inside of this concept, which I'm sure we'll dive into what that really means and what that really looks like. But the reason why this topic came to me is because of the work that I do. It's just constantly a message that comes up in every single thing that I channel. I've channeled a lot of different beings of light at this point, and the conversation that comes up is always a little bit different, but there's one giant through line. And if you're paying really close attention, it's very obvious. And it's that the reason why we suffer, the reason why we don't feel comfortable inside of ourselves and our lives is because we don't unconditionally love who we are. And that's ultimately always what we're chasing, but we're never really giving to ourselves in an unconditional way. And part of that is also part of why we come here, and part of the ascension process is recognizing the divine nature of who you are and acknowledging it and embracing it as it is, meaning that you're already enough. You're the greatness that you want to embody, that you want to feel and recognize is already there. It's already there inside of you. There's nothing you have to do to get it, and there's nothing that you have to change about who you are in order to recognize it and fully embody it. The ascension process is not about becoming great, about reaching the state of enlightenment because you've changed something about you. It's about loving who you are unconditionally by recognizing your own greatness, the own divinity and the light that shines inside of you now. But there's something really uncomfortable about believing that that's true, that there's nothing you have to do to feel validated or recognized. It's just about buying into the belief system that you already are enough. And there's resistance inside of that, I have found in the work that I do. And that's really what I want to explore today is why is the resistance there? Why is it so challenging to believe that the greatness that you want to embody is already there and there's nothing you have to do to get it? And so I guess
Yeah,
we can start there, Kelly. What do you think that resistance is and where's it coming from?
I think a big part of it is that we all have this like false you, false me, and we can call it like our ego. There's like an egoic structure or an egoic concept of who we are. And when we're identified with that ego, with that false us, then we buy into that story that it's grounded on, which is that there's stuff for me to fix. I'm not there yet. I'm the problem fixer. Like these are all of the stories and the identities that come with that egoic structure or that false us. And so the idea that we're already enough, that we're already great, that we are inherently great is a direct threat to this aspect of self that we sometimes think is us. But it's not us, it's an egoic construct. But in the human experience, we identify with it. And I think part of the journey, the soul's journey in the human experience is to learn how to, over time, peel away from that egoic construct and ground more fully in the truth of who you are and discover really who you are at a soulful level. But that's part of the game. And inside of the game, we fall under the illusion that I am this person that's not there yet. I am this person that has problems that I need to fix in order for me to be good enough, or in order for me to be there, in order for me to be great, or in order for me to be worthy, or in order for me to be lovable, in order for me to feel okay about myself, right? And so when we are offered this concept of like owning your greatness, knowing that you are inherently already great and unique and that like you deserve to own that and to shine that out into the world, I think a lot of us hear that And there's a part of us that like automatically agrees with it. For most people, maybe not everyone. There might be some people who are at a point in their journey where like they hear that and they're like, yeah, but you don't know me. Like I'm not great.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But for the people that hear it and are like, yeah, I know. Like I know that they, like I know I'm great. Like or I know that I'm already worthy, right? I think that may be coming from like this just this inherent knowing that we all have, or it might just be coming from again an egoic construct that says like that should be true, but it's not felt. And when we are operating unconsciously out of these deeper belief systems and the deeper egoic construct of I'm not ready yet, I'm not good enough yet, I have problems I need to fix, etc., then I think a lot of people run into this conflict where it's like, I know that I'm worthy, technically. I know that I'm good enough to get what I want, or I know that I have aspects of myself that are great and qualities in myself that are unique and lovely and worthy, etc., that I deserve to show out into the world, and then I want to own that, while at the same time not living like that's true and
Right.
still holding
Yeah.
themselves back in a lot of ways.
Yeah. It's like recognition consciously that yeah, I'm worthy, yeah, I'm good enough, yeah, I have a lot to offer is there, and yet there's no demonstration of that. There's no going out into the world and like shining in front of people, putting yourself in positions where people can see that. And the reason for that is, what do you think? If there's a part of you that's buying into your greatness, but you're hesitating being seen inside of your greatness, what is that
Mm.
resistance?
Maybe you don't want to be wrong.
Yeah, there's
Or you
like a
don't.
part of you that fears, what if I'm wrong? Like, what if I fall flat on my face? The realization that who you desire to be is not who you actually are, I think is a really big fear for a lot of people.
And they would rather live as if they're not great and accept the consequences of not believing in your greatness than acquire all the benefits of like fully standing in your power and believing in your greatness and then later getting confirmation that that's not true,
Or,
whatever that confirmation would look like.
yeah, or believing in it quietly to yourself and never testing the waters to see, well, what can I do with
Mhm.
this? Is it really true that what I believe is there is actually there? And I think
Which is not
something,
really believing in it. I think it's just
right?
telling yourself a story.
Yeah, I think that that highlights that there's a part of you that's living in
Mhm.
a lot of doubt that the greatness that you sometimes believe could be there or is there isn't to the degree you're telling yourself it is. And there's a lot of fear of being found out, fear of someone else recognizing that worst fear in you, and then having to be seen in that way that you're hiding from.
Right. Like that idea of someone else recognizing that you're not enough, or that seeing some projected fearful truth of you of not being worthy, not being great, not being there yet, not being good enough, and then having them see that and also see that you were believing that you were enough at the
Yeah,
same time. It's like a double whammy of like, not only am I not enough and they're seeing that, but they're also seeing that I was stupid and delusional in believing that I was good enough.
right.
And so if people are going to see me, people are going to see the truth of me and discover my flaws, discover my imperfections, discover that I have things that problems that need to be fixed before I'm great, before I'm good enough, before I'm worthy, then at least let people see it and have me already know it and
Yes.
have them see that I know it.
There's a fear of being delusional, not coming across as delusional, but actually being delusional, right?
Yeah.
Like if you show up in a way, and I can use myself as an example here. I I talk about a lot of crazy shit on the internet and I do a lot of stuff on the internet where I know people are looking at me and being like, she's completely delusional. But because I believe so wholeheartedly in it, I don't think I'm delusional. And so their their opinion of me doesn't really bother me. But there was a time when it did because I didn't fully buy into what I was saying. And there was this fear of really honestly being delusional, coming across as delusional, and getting something wrong that was still alive inside of me. And I do think that that's the difference where you don't care when you fully buy into it. When when you're really owning it inside of you, the opinions of others kind of melt away in a different way where they don't when there's a part of you that's still in conflict.
I'd like to point out, just as an aside to this, that you're delusional if you're believing whatever the opposite of the truth was. But there's only half of that equation that we don't want to be that kind of delusional. Like if it was that I actually am great, but I'm telling myself that I'm not, that's delusional, but I don't mind being that kind of delusional,
That's so true.
right?
Yeah.
But if it's that I'm not great and I'm telling myself that I am, I don't want to be that kind of delusional. For some reason, that's more threatening.
Well, what do you think that is? Why do you think it's more threatening that way?
Maybe
I think
it's just societally normalized.
I think that I think that this is where our biological brain comes in, where it's
Yeah.
this for survival mechanism that we're still grappling with, that we haven't fully evolved out of, which is this need to be a part of the community and part of the tribe. And being rejected from that is extremely painful because it's a death sentence biologically.
Hmm. And maybe it's connected to all the evidence that we've received throughout our lifetime that says that if you think highly of yourself, people don't like that
Yeah.
and they're not going to accept you. Or if you think better of yourself than you really are, and like how much evidence have we got in our life that has said that that's wrong? Like I even hear comments to this day along the lines of like not necessarily targeted towards me, but people just being like, oh, they think really fully of themselves. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, Simone Biles just said that. She's like, I staked my claim that I'm the greatest gymnast in the world, and people called me arrogant, but I've won the most world titles. And it's like
You're
stating
stating a fact.
a fact about you is triggering people. And this is maybe where we can get into this conversation of
Mm,
what positive and negative projections really are and how they're coming into play with this. But as soon as you state a claim about something that is demonstrating that you are owning your greatness. Sometimes that isn't received well by others. What's your
yeah.
take on that?
Well, let's give like a very general overview of what a projection is.
Sure.
So anytime that you are judging someone else or triggered by something that they're doing or a quality within them, it's always reflecting back to you a quality of yourself that you have rejected. And so let's apply that to this specific scenario where someone is triggered by and judging someone as arrogant for owning their greatness, which is really what she's doing. She's stating a fact, sure, but she's like claiming that like this thing about me that I've achieved or whatever is great. It's awesome. If someone sees that and is triggered by that and then has a negative judgment of it, it's reflecting back to them their own relationship with their own greatness and the qualities in them that are good. Because if they can't own that there are things in them that are great, that they're good at, that they're naturally talented at, if they haven't allowed themselves to own that, to claim that, to go after it for multiple reasons. Maybe it's because they were taught that it wasn't worthwhile doing it, so they had to go down this more logical path and go to study in university, whatever, rather than, going after their passion or whatever. That's like a typical example of that. Or it could be that someone else shamed them as not for being good at it or for not being good enough at the thing that they're good at, possibly. It could be so many things that have taught someone that the thing that I see inside of me that could be greater, that is greater, that I'm actually good at, is it's wrong for me to own that and for me to really live my life through that greatness. And so when I see someone else owning it, claiming it, I'm going to make that wrong
Or
because
they
I've made
don't
it wrong for
believe
me.
that right. Or I think it's that she is highlighting where a lot of people don't believe that they have greatness inside of them,
Yeah,
right? Where they're all of a sudden being met with this deep insecurity that she has something that I don't, and I will never have
true.
that, and I'll be never recognized. I will never be recognized for it because I don't believe it's there, so I can't recognize it within myself. And so
That is
if
true.
I can't recognize it, she can't either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's either a greatness in you that you've acknowledged but rejected, or you just haven't allowed yourself to discover the greatness of you because you don't
Right.
believe it's there, or you tell yourself that it's probably not there as an excuse to not have to explore it.
Yeah. How does someone projection work is very tricky because it's almost like it's so staring you right in the face that you almost miss it. That's how I sort of see it.
Yeah, it's
Sometimes
so
it
true.
takes a long time to see the forest through the trees because you're just in it. How does
Hmm.
someone begin to recognize their own projections so that they can work on them?
Honestly, I think that for like how I started using projection work and have gotten to a place now where like I can see it so clearly. Like honestly, when I'm judging someone or when I feel judged by someone, there's something that goes off in my brain where it's like, oh, I'm judging this about me. And then it just like softens a bit. But it started by me creating space that was dedicated to sitting down and just going through a process of inquiry around what are the judgments that I have of other people, and then also what are the things that I'm afraid other people are judging about me, and looking at them and exploring them and inquiring what's true about them and what what the opposite of those beliefs are, etc. I've very much used Byron Katie's process for this called the work. Literally go to thework.com and you can discover more about it, which is just a very simple process of asking yourself certain questions about a judgment that you're making of someone else. Um,
And it's
but
massively
where is
uncomfortable.
it's massively uncomfortable
Yeah.
for a lot
Yeah.
of people, which funnily enough, I don't think I ever found it uncomfortable because I just found it so fascinating. But I
Right.
do also see that it's really uncomfortable for a lot of people to do that
Yeah.
work for a couple of reasons. I think that even just acknowledging and admitting that you judge other people is really hard.
There's shame.
Yeah.
There's like the
There's
judgment
shame
of
in
the judgment.
judging.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it. The judgment of the judgment,
Yeah.
100%. And so I think that a a way through that I have found really supportive is just being able to recognize, okay, first of all, like obviously we all judge, but also like if you're judging, but you're willing to do the work to see that it's not about them, and you are using it to help you become more clear, to help you become more compassionate towards other people and towards yourself, which is really what it's offering you. Every time that you judge someone, it's an opportunity to discover something about yourself that you've rejected and accept yourself more fully and become more whole, but also to become more compassionate towards other people. And so judging other people is actually like really beneficial in a
Mhm.
lot of ways if you can use it consciously. And
Right.
so there doesn't have to be a wrongness to it, one, because it's normal, but two, because it can be used in a really powerful way. And I think that idea behind it almost like now I get excited when I'm judging someone because it's like, I see that I'm thinking someone is selfish, or I'm seeing that I think someone is like being a bit too like out there or whatever. And I'm like, whoa, I think I'm too out there. And then I like see how I've internalized that myself. And I'm like, oh wow, interesting. So now I have an opportunity to own that part of myself that wants to put myself out there more because I see in this other person that I've made it wrong for them to do that. And it is just like, wow, that was really awesome that I that I
Yeah.
learned that today. I'm
Well,
glad I
you're
judged them.
seeing the process now as you're getting some you're finding parts of yourself to show more love to. And so you're seeing it as little gifts that you're being given. Where I think when
Yeah.
someone is first introduced to the work or to projection work in general, it feels so uncomfortable because you see it as another thing that you hate about yourself, another thing to blame yourself for,
Yes.
to shame yourself for, and to judge in who you are. And it
Hmm.
takes time to unravel that as you're doing the work because it's like further bringing up the projections over and over and over again because there's so many
Yes.
layers to it. But projection work, and I feel comfortable saying this, is the spiritual journey.
Yes.
Literally what it is.
Yes.
The spiritual journey isn't about going to some monastery and like just like being in meditation all the time. It's about self-discovery. Talk about
Mhm.
self-discovery. That's projection work. Discovering parts of yourself that you've been suppressing, rejecting, and ignoring, and bringing them closer to you, looking at them and creating acceptance around them. That
Yes.
is ascension. That's the
It
work.
and it's so powerful. Like
So
I could
powerful.
scream from the rooftops how projection work has been like my go-to most valuable process and tool that I've learned along the way.
How does recognizing something that you're ashamed of yourself for set you free and not create more shame and judgment?
Yeah. I think that has to be your intention first and foremost. And I think that's where a lot of people might get stuck in projection work is that they don't realize that that's what the goal is and they don't see a benefit to it. They haven't come up to themselves with a good enough reason why I would want to accept the parts of myself that I've made wrong. Because we rejected them for a reason. We think that there's benefit to keeping these parts of ourselves hidden, rejected, suppressed. And so I think that there is a switch that happens, whether it happens because you intellectually start understanding how these things work a little bit more, or you experience it more fully in yourself, or a combination of both. But what you really do need to understand, first and foremost, is that when you reject a part of yourself, it doesn't go away. And that's so, so, so big. And I've watched this happen so much in my life where I think it's so hilarious because, like, as an example, if I was really, really triggered by selfish people, it's because I made my own selfishness wrong. But if I were to recognize, like, I only judge people that are selfish because I've told myself that it's wrong for me to be selfish, and then I just ended it there. I didn't I didn't discover that it was actually beneficial for me to own that I'm selfish because, like, I don't want to be selfish. Being selfish is wrong. Then the projection work isn't doing anything beneficial. It's just making you more annoyed at yourself, probably, and making you
Yeah.
feel more wrong.
Yeah.
But if you can see that there is one, first and foremost, that you're still selfish, even though you've told yourself that it's wrong to be selfish. And that can be very confronting to look at.
Right.
Because when you look at a projection of seeing someone and saying they're a selfish person, and you turn that around yourself and you see, how am I being selfish in my own life? Even though I've made it wrong for me to be selfish, there might be ways that it's leaking out. Because when you reject a part of yourself, it doesn't go away, it just becomes unconscious. And we can see little snippets of where we're still acting selfishly in our life, but we just might be more manipulative at making it so that it's not seen that way on the outside. And so when we can recognize that even though I've made this quality in myself wrong, it's still here and it still shows up in my life, then the whole point of rejecting it is kind of stupid. It's not working. It's effectiveless. And so then we can see, well, maybe if I'm going to be selfish anyways, or I'm going to have this part of me anyways, I wonder how much differently I would experience it if I showed compassion to myself for having it, if I accepted that this is going to be a part of my human experience, if I normalized it. Simply normalizing selfishness, I think, is really powerful because how much of society has made us feel like being selfish is wrong when really, like, look at how, like, look at this human experience. We live in our body, in our singular body, through our singular focal point. we're experiencing life, we're experiencing every single second of every moment with ourselves. Of course we're going to be selfish.
My guides are showing me like a shit ton of stuff as you're talking, and they're saying that that's actually not true. You're not seeing you through a single focal point because everything is a projection.
Yeah,
So you're seeing you through everything around you being reflected back to you if you can see it that way.
right.
And that is literally the gift in coming here, is because you can't have that experience elsewhere. And what is more challenging than that about kind of seeing yourself fractured into all of these different pieces being reflected back to you, and one by one witnessing them and choosing to bring it in and integrate it, show it love, bring it in and integrate it, show it love, and one by one collecting those pieces until all of a sudden the projection of you shifts. And it doesn't
Hmm.
matter what's reflected back to you, all you see is love because that's how you're feeling inside of you. And that's when you transcend this experience. And
Yeah,
that is very challenging to do, which is what we're here to learn. But
yeah,
there really is no better way of learning how to unconditionally love you by witnessing the parts of you that you've been rejecting and choosing love instead.
yeah. And I think a pathway into choosing love and acceptance of all parts of you is for a lot of people normalizing it, which I think with the example of selfishness is like looking at normalizing we're all selfish, but also like finding ways to explain it to yourself, which like you're totally right. Like there is oneness and we all are connected. We are seeing ourselves through all these different perspectives. While simultaneously, like we are in this human experience, living life as this one human.
Yeah,
And because we're not in the heads of every other person, knowing what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they're smelling, what they're seeing, what they're interpreting, we don't see all of that all the time. We're
right.
more tuned into what we're experiencing, what we're seeing, what we're smelling, what we're feeling, etc. Like that's selfishness. And like it's the of
Yeah,
course we're going to prioritize our own perspective because
th-
that's the one that we access the most easily.
I see what you're saying. The very nature of this human reality is self like focused,
Yes.
because that is what we're living inside of. It's like you can only see the world through your own perspective,
Yeah.
even though everyone is reflecting it back to you,
Yeah.
but that's the
Yeah.
focal point, is your perspective. And so you have to make selfish choices because you don't know what
Hmm.
someone else is thinking. You can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if we did try to do that all the time, it would just be like we'd never make decisions. Just
Yeah.
it would be to, and there's a time and a place to consider how might someone else think about this or what might someone else want. Like there's definitely room to integrate that more fully because it's something that we can do and that we do have access to thinking about how other people might think and interpret what we're doing. But automatically in this human experience, the interpretation and the perspective that we have the most easy access to, because it's just there, is our own. And it's so funny how we've made that wrong.
But we can't even reach that place of unity unless we go through this first.
Yeah.
Like the spiritual talk always kind of makes me roll my eyes, but like ascension is this like big thing that everyone's talking about what they want, but it's an inside job. It's this. We can't create a world where we're all connected when you're constantly being offended by other people, judging them, and not looking at how that's kind of reflection of what's going on inside of you.
Hmm.
What about the other end of this, where rather than judging someone harshly, you see them as like up on a pedestal,
Yeah.
where,
Yeah.
oh my God, like this person is so smart. This person can do such incredible things. I want to be just like this person. I want to be around this person. I want to be, I want what they have. I think that they're incredible. Where does that come from?
I will just say, and I don't know if this is a universal experience, but this part of projection work is way harder for me.
Really?
It's way harder. It's so much easier for me to see I judge someone for this and I judge myself for this, but it's way harder for me to go, I admire someone for this. I have the same thing that I'm not letting myself admire.
So that's
That's
what
way harder for me.
So just to clue everyone in, that's what we're sort of talking about. Projection work goes two ways, right? When you judge another person, that is considered a negative projection where you are, not seeing how the judgment you're making of them is reflecting a judgment that you're making within yourself in a quote unquote negative way.
Hmm.
But there's a thing called positive projection where you're seeing somebody owning their greatness
Hmm.
and you think that they're really great too, in a way that makes you sort of put them up on a pedestal, even if you're not really realizing you're doing it. And that's also a projection. It's called a positive projection, where you are seeing them in their greatness and putting them up on a pedestal because it's reflecting back to you where you're not owning that same greatness that lives inside of you. You're seeing it in them and admiring it in them because it exists in you. You're just not realizing it.
Hmm. Yeah. And jealousy, it feels like the energy of jealousy, but jealousy can go both ways. Jealousy
Yeah.
can cause someone to judge you more, or
Yeah.
jealousy can cause someone to admire you and put you up on a pedestal. And so when someone is experiencing jealousy and the way that they move through that energy is by pushing themselves down, making themselves feel inferior, and putting the other person up and making themselves feel making them superior. I think that experience it does offer us an opportunity to see what quality in them do I also have that I've never given myself permission to own is great. And I think that's really hard because on the surface, what we see that they have, we're like, I don't have that. That's why I'm jealous.
Or that's why
But I
that's
think we
where
need to
they
go
are.
deeper.
And that's why
Yeah,
that's where they are and I'm over here.
exactly. Yeah. But it's not about the surface level thing. It's not that this person is great because they have a very successful business and they're making over $100,000 a year and I don't have that, therefore they're better than me. Like on the surface, yeah, that the circumstances of that difference between you two might be true, but there's a quality that you see in them that you're not allowing yourselves to own. And maybe that quality is that they've had patience enough to to build up to that point, or they've had successes, or they've been recognized in ways that have allowed them to be up to that point. And maybe you're not at that point that they're at, but maybe you've received recognition for your work or for your value or what you're good at, and you don't let yourself accept that. You're like, yeah, like you might think that I'm good, or maybe I had a fluke where I had like a couple of good things that I did, or a couple of good experiences, or I helped a couple of people, or whatever. But that was a fluke. Or it wasn't enough because I'm not at where they're at. But that's not the point. It doesn't matter where you're at, it's the quality that you're not allowing yourself to own, that you now have an opportunity to see. I see that they're great because they're doing these things. They're getting recognition. They're doing good things in the world. They're helping people. They're working hard. They've had the patience to build this thing. Where have I also done that, even if the way that it looks for me is different?
Or how could I begin to believe that I could do that if I was consistent in buying into that as true and put in the work?
Yeah.
I think so many of us aren't willing to take that step. And that's where it sort of breaks down, coming back to what we were discussing at the beginning, where you can believe that it lives inside of you, but if you're not willing to put yourself out there, then there's a part of you that doesn't fully believe that it exists or is scared that it might not, and that other people will see that.
Yeah.
And there's something inside of being envious of someone who was willing to test the waters where you're not. I think that that's
Mhm.
been reflected back to me a lot with the work I'm doing now, where I've watched people watch me do things on the internet that are really uncomfortable, not realizing that the reason why they're triggered by me is because they're not willing to put themselves out there, even though they believe that they probably have something to offer. It's that being
Yes.
seen part.
Yes. I love that differentiation because this is a whole aspect that I wasn't speaking to, which is yes, jealousy can the experience of jealousy can be I don't have what they have, but the another experience of jealousy is I can't have what they have. It's like putting a limitation not only on where you're at now and the comparison of where they're at now versus where you're at now, but it's also a comparison of where they're at versus what I'm capable of. And that can be very deflating. But that is exactly what you're speaking to is that we're feeling jealous because we are holding on to this limitation of what we're capable of. And that limitation is being expressed on how we're not showing up and the risks that we're not taking and the ways that we're not putting ourselves out there, et cetera, out of our own fear. And so jealousy can really be a wake-up call to a way that we feel called to show up that we're limiting ourselves on showing up that way out of fear or doubt or both.
So when you recognize this projection taking place, how do you then bridge the gap? How do you then take the action? Because that's a whole other ball game. Becoming aware of the projection is one aspect of it. And then how do you integrate it to move forward into aligned action from there?
I think this is where having some somatic awareness and some somatic practice is really important because there, like, I can feel the sensation in my body of times where I've realized that I'm jealous of this person because I'm telling myself that I can't do what they're doing. And then I'm like, well, then maybe I should start doing what I'm doing. And then there's just like this,
Yeah.
no,
Yep. People, you can't circumnavigate the somatic work. Like it's just a
yeah.
must because the fear is still going to be felt regardless of whether how aware you are of what's creating it. And if the fear is uncomfortable enough to keep you where you are, then you're never going to move, regardless of how aware you are of all of your projections.
Yeah, because the way that you automatically hold fear, and the only way that you've ever learned how to hold fear is to avoid it, which is the common natural way to move through fear is to try to just push it away and not go there, tiptoe around it as best as you can, then you're never going to take forward action into the thing that you see is available for you because it is going to bring up fear. That's why you haven't done it yet. And so somatic work, what it's really about is learning how to increase your capacity to be inside of uncomfortable sensation. And fear is a sensation. It's a sensation and an experience of thoughts combined together that we've put a label on, that label being fear. But how you experience fear in your body is probably something that a lot of us are unconscious to. We don't even really know where we're feeling it and how it feels in our body when we have the experience of fear. But I think generally we can all agree that it's like this sensation of just like stuckness and wanting to either freeze or to run. And a lot of us choose to run away from the thing that's bringing us fear. That's why we don't end up doing the thing and then being jealous of that person. But rather than reacting and allowing ourselves to continue reacting to fear that same way, somatic work really starts by one, recognizing when it's there and taking a moment when you're clued in, when you clue into the fact that you're experiencing fear in the moment, take a moment to be like, well, what is that really like? What sensation or contraction do I feel in my body? Where do I feel tightness in my body? Where do I feel the most uncomfortable in my body right now? And allowing that space to be there, allowing that space to just breathe and to marinate. And very slowly over time, stretching that window of tolerance increasing your capacity to be with that sensation before you go and do the automatic thing that you do in reaction to it, which is to run away, to avoid it, to just shut down the thought, to be like, well, I'm not going to do that anyways, and go busy yourself with something else or stay looping in the jealousy.
Can I put forward the notion that that is owning your greatness?
Let's talk about it.
It's not taking the action to do something cool to then finally feel great inside of you. It's sitting inside of the present moment and feeling what's there and recognizing that that's what makes you great,
Mm-hmm.
the essence of you, what's alive
Yeah.
inside of you right here, right now. And that's challenging to buy into.
Yeah.
But that's ultimately what is comes through in every channeled message I've ever done. The greatness is already there. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to get to it. You don't have to realize it through an accomplishment or validation from another person. It's recognized in what's right here, right now.
Can you speak to your own personal story and experience of warming up to that over time? Because it sounds like that's a message that you've got recurring. And I
Yeah.
can imagine that from the first time that you heard that message to now, there's been a shift. Can
Yeah.
you talk more about that?
Yeah. I would be lying if I said that I wasn't fully bought in. Like sometimes there's a part of me that still reverts back into, yes, but I haven't done anything with my quote unquote greatness yet, and therefore I can't fully realize it. So I'm human too. There's a part of me that still buys into that old narrative. But essentially, what has happened for me over time is I went from a person who literally did not believe there was an ounce of greatness inside of me. Like, I thought that I was the lowest of the low and I was dealt a really shitty hand in life. And there was just nothing special about me, nothing. And I lived life really trying to find it. I didn't just succumb to this belief system. I worked my ass off trying to find something I was really good at and then practicing it over and over and over again to prove it wrong.
Yeah.
And it never worked. I fell
Yeah.
flat on my face every time, every single time. And that further fueled my desire to find it.
Yeah.
So that was my go-to. And eventually, this projection of wanting to find my greatness and projecting it onto accomplishments so that I could feel it through the accomplishment and looking to other people who were accomplishing the things I wanted to accomplish and saying, they can't possibly have something I don't have. I must have it. I have to prove to myself that I do. And moving from one thing to the next and failing at all of them until finally, and then I projected onto my business. I projected it onto spirituality. I have to be the most psychic person. I have to be really good at reading
Hmm.
people. I have to be able to hear my spirit guides perfectly and see them perfectly. It's all the same bullshit.
Yeah.
And then finally, I started being able to hear my spirit guides, and the messages they were giving me were shitty because they kept telling me, love yourself, just love yourself over and over and over again. And it was contradicting the way I was moving through life, which was, well, I can't love myself yet. I haven't done the great thing yet.
Right.
And the message was just consistent over and over and over again inside of every conversation I had with them, every channeled message that I channeled through them, through me, from them. Finally, I had to start looking at it. And I had to start looking at my own projection, doing my own projection work that I was not fully seeing because it was so close to me. And it was through the channeled messages that I was getting over and over and over again that I finally saw the forest through the trees and recognized that projection inside of me and started doing the projection work and applying it into my business and to my personal life, into all the spiritual work I was doing. So it was through projection work that I
Hmm.
began to really own my own greatness, which is literally just me. But it
And
was
what
an
does that look
evolution.
like?
What does that look like? Like
Like
for me,
I see what it looks like for you because I've seen you step more into your greatness. But for people that like haven't seen you in this journey, like what has it like how have you shown up differently in the process of more fully grounding inside of your greatness?
oh, I see what you're saying. Like tangible things that I can point to.
Yeah.
So I never, when I first started working as an entrepreneur, sort of before I started my business, but wanting to offer services, I never charged for anything, ever, 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 ever. Because I didn't feel like I was good enough to charge money for it, even though I had been doing it for 15 years at that point. I didn't think I was good at it. I didn't feel worthy of charging for it, so I didn't.
Yeah.
And then that slowly transitioned to no, I should be charging for my quote unquote worth. Um, I'm going to charge a lot for what I do
Hmm.
and feel massively uncomfortable inside of what I'm charging, but I'm worth it because that's what I was made to believe. So I'm worth this. And then that's slowly transitioning into actually, I don't want to charge at all anymore. I just want to show up inside of the work I'm doing and feel really good about it and talk about things that I feel really good about regardless of what other people's opinions are and do things that fill me with aliveness regardless of the outcome of them. So it started to be less outcome focused so that everything I was doing up until that point was to reach an outcome that I could point to and say, look how great I am, so that other people could recognize it and then I could feel it. And now it's more intrinsically, do I feel great inside of this? Yes or no? And if the answer is yes, then that's what I do. Is that concrete enough?
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the way I show up on social media. It's the conversations I have with people. It's who I decide to spend time with. It's how
Yes.
much money I charge for things. It's the activities that I do versus don't do, or the decisions I make versus don't make, or the boundaries I set versus don't set.
Yes.
All of those things have shifted and changed over time as I have anchored into my enoughness, like my greatness
Hmm.
being the essence of me and not what I do with that.
I love that summary because it allows people to find an intrinsic reason that they would want to do this work too. Because I think for a lot of people listening, hearing that there's like, you know, there's a reason maybe why I should want to own my greatness because I'm not. I think that that's not enough reason fully. Like just knowing that that's something that's apparently good, like owning my greatness would probably be good, I guess. I don't know, like it sounds like a good thing. Isn't enough for people to do that work because it is uncomfortable for all the reasons that we mentioned in the beginning and all the reasons why we have fear, resistance, and doubt around it. And so if someone can connect the dots to what that can look like, how that's going to feel for them, what that's going to shift inside of the way that they experience so many things that they want to experience differently inside of their career, inside of their social media presence, if that's something that they have, inside of their romantic relationships, their social life, their platonic relationships, their career, their hobbies, etc. If that can start to create meaning enough for someone, then I think that the idea of like I want to look at this more fully is going to build itself more
I
fully. And I
love
think that
that.
it took me a long time to reach that point for myself because I just didn't want to feel like feeling great sounded worse than like owning my greatness sounded more threatening and had more consequences in my head than not owning it. And
Can
that's
we
what I think a lot of places people are
can we
there.
talk about that?
Yeah.
What those consequences were?
So the consequences of the perceived consequences, we'll start here, of owning my greatness or believing that I'm great, believing in my self-worth, where one, I could be wrong, and the shame that would come with that would be really big, being seen as that negative delusional that we talked about earlier. I think there's also a consequence that we perceive, which is that like if I if I tell myself I'm already good enough, then I won't be motivated to do anything. I think that's another fear that a lot of people have. They think that by telling themselves that they're not enough, that's the fuel and the only fuel that they can use to go do things that they can be proud of or be happy about, to achieve things in their life that will make them feel good about themselves. And so they fear that if they already felt good about themselves, that they wouldn't go do those things and they would just become lazy or just an insignificant part of humanity. And that's really terrifying and a bit existential for a lot of people. On this other side of the same coin, the consequences of not owning greatness might look a little bit different and nichey depending on the person, but I think speaking to a lot of what you said, like how does not owning your greatness affect how you show up inside of every little pocket of your life, inside of your relationship with your partner? Because you don't ground yourself on you already being great, how do you show up inside of that relationship? How do you perceive the little things that they do or that they don't do? How do you treat that other person? How are you interpreting, like, how they feel about you, and then how does that as a byproduct affect how you show up for them, or how you don't show up, or how you feel about yourself, or what you do or what you don't do, et cetera, et cetera. Like, just look at how differently you imagine you would be inside of your relationship and with your partner if you have one, if you were so fully grounded on owning that you're already great and you don't need to do anything else to be great, versus when you're not owning that, and when you're afraid that you might not be great and that that person might see it. I think that's a big part of it, is especially with a romantic partner, when we don't feel like we're great and we feel like we're not there yet, we kind of fall into this misunderstanding that the reason why this person is choosing to be with me, whether it's a friend or romantic partner, is because they haven't seen the thing that's wrong with me yet. And then the fear of rejection and the fear of abandonment can start to, rear its ugly head throughout
Right.
our relationship in different ways, depending on the person.
What about the fear in finally owning your greatness and then being rejected by those around you and
That's
being
a big one
left
too.
alone? That I that is one that was never on my radar until I started experiencing it firsthand.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who is afraid that they'll be left all on their own and lose all of their relationships if they do decide to do this work and feel better inside of who they are as a byproduct?
What I don't want to offer solely on its own, even though there is some truth to it, so I am going to mention it, but I think that this is such like a basic thing that people would say to another person in this scenario, is like, well, those aren't the type of people that you want to be with anyways.
But
Like there's truth
but
to
their
that.
family and their friends and they're your partner, so it's a little bit more complicated.
It is.
Right.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is where projection work has like a back-ended benefit as well that I don't think we spoke to as much, is when you're doing projection work and you can see that what you judge in another person is actually a part of yourself that you've judged, and you've done that work enough to know that it's true. And it's allowed you to have more compassion for other people. And it's allowed you to also see that really the negativity here has nothing to do with that other person. All of the negativity has everything to do with what you're negative about inside of yourself. So when you've experienced that enough to know that it's true, then you can actually apply it in the reverse, where you can see that if someone is judging you for something, or they're triggered by you for something, it has nothing to do with you. Absolutely nothing. And I'm not saying that to like say, well, then it shouldn't hurt you, because of course it's going to hurt to have people judge and to have people leave and to have, feel lonely, to feel abandoned in some way. It's not to say that that's not going to hurt, but I think a big part of what makes that stuff hurt, not all of it, but a part of it, is when we personalize it. When we say that they left because of me, because I wasn't worthy, or because I wasn't good enough, or because there's something wrong with me. And the projection work in the reverse, where we're able to see like the only reason why someone would judge me and feel triggered by me and need to leave is because they can't hold the aspect of themselves that they see in me with love and compassion and acceptance. And that's their journey. And that's sad that they're not able to do that. And it sucks that you're having to then, get the back end of that. And that
Right.
you have to receive the consequences of them not recognizing that and doing that work themselves. That does suck. And that ability to see it from that